Okay, today we are going to look at slave trade in East Africa. So those are the things. That's what we are going to look at: slave trade in East Africa. And I know majority of you looked at long distance trade, you looked at Indian Ocean trade. But before we start, I know we have a challenge of to differentiate these types of trade. Like we have slave trade, Indian Ocean trade, and others. And before we start, before going far, I think we need to first know these three types of trade. And you people, you have to help me to differentiate between these two types, these three types. We are going to look at specifically slave trade. We are going to look at trade in East Africa. Specifically, we are going to look at trade in East Africa. Now, looking at trade in East Africa, who can give us some of the trade which were in East Africa? Who can help us to remind us?
Long-distance trade.
Pardon?
Long-distance trade.
Long-distance trade, that is, She has talked about long distance.
Indian Ocean trade.
Yeah, thank you. Then we have another one called Indian Ocean
trade. Slave trade.
Then we have slave
trade.
Those are the main trade system we know. So you people, all of you looked at these ones. The first one we are going to look at, because we are looking at trade, specifically we want to look at slave trade as a topic. But now, before we go, we first need to know, because people, they don't differentiate between slave trade, they don't differentiate between, do you know a girl called Shamsa Nkunda?
Yeah, she's informed too.
She's informed too, okay. Okay. Uda does come, okay. Now, people, we are looking at slave trade. We are looking at trade in East Africa, but we need to know, before we go, we need to know what were these trade. Are you getting? But remember, as I told you, let us first start with Indian Ocean trade. What do you know? Like, for example, when they ask you to write an introduction about Indian Ocean trade, what thing do you know about Indian Ocean trade? Yes? You put up your hand, then you hope us to tell us Indian Ocean trade. What do you know about Indian Ocean? How we have Shahida. Yes, Shahida.
It was carried out by the coastal states.
Yeah, it was carried out by the coastal state. But yeah, thank you. It was carried out by the coastal states with what? With who? Remember these types, especially this one and this one, they get their definitions from where it was conducted, which people participated in it. But before we go, which people participated in this trade, the Indian Ocean trade? It was between which people and which people? Before you proceed. Yes, Rami.
The Arabs and the coastal people.
Arabs.
So it was
the coastal people and the Arabs.
The coastal people, and the coastal people at that time, they were who? Who can help us? At that time, who were the coastal?
They were.
Yes?
The
yes,
Arabs.
Could I'm seeing your hand is up?
Bantu.
Yeah, Bantu. We had the Bantu. At that time, the coast was occupied by the Bantu and the Kushites. The Kushites. Let me hope this is
Bantu
now who were
and the Kushan.
people and the foreigners? And the foreigners at that time were who?
Arabs.
They were the
Arabs, Persian. Arabs and the
Persians. We talk about Indonesians, Indians. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? It was between the coastal people and that time the coastal people. Now let us come here on the long distance trade. It was between which people and which people?
The coastal people and the interior tribes.
Yeah, so it was between the coastal people and the coastal people at that time, they were who?
The Bantu. The Bantu.
Any other?
The Arabs.
They were the Arabs. Why?
Arabs.
At the time of Indian Ocean trade, these
Arabs
the Arabs were just foreigners. They were just coming at the coast. Now, at the time of long distance trade, already Arabs had displaced the Africans. Now they had taken over the coast and they had intermarried with some Africans, giving birth to which people?
Swahili.
The Swahili. So the coastal people at that time of long distance trade, they were the Arabs and the Swahili. The Swahili people. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? Between, and so the coast was the interior tribes. The interior tribes. So the interior tribes, you can give examples like which type? Can you give me some examples?
Baganda, Basoga.
Banyoro.
Yeah, we had
The
Nyamwezi.
Baganda,
the
Bamba, Akamba,
Chaga, Maganda,
Akamba,
Banyoro. Oh, you talk about that. So,
Basoga.
yeah. Then let us go to slave trade. Now, let me explain here with slave trade. For slave trade, it was in both trade. In both trades. It was in long distance trade. It was even in Indian Ocean trade. The reason why we talk about it as an, who can give us, okay, the reason why we talk about it as an independent trade is because this slave trade caused misery to the people of Africa. That's why that we have to bring it out and we talk about it, because many Africans suffered because of slave trade. People never suffered because of gold trade. People never suffered because of ivory trade. But majority of the people, they suffered because of what? Slave trade. Am I clear?
Yes, teacher.
And
Yes.
when we talk about what is slave trade, who can help us? You put up your hand and tell us what is slave trade. You understand? Naigaga, I saw your hand.
Slave trade was the commercial transaction of buying and selling of human beings.
Yeah, slave trade was. I see what she has used there. Was. Don't say is. Who can give us a reason why we don't use is?
Because slave trade no longer.
It no longer happens.
Really?
Yeah.
Anyone who can help
Enough.
us? Anyone? Any other attempt? Thank you. Cynthia, another attempt?
It happened a long time ago.
Because
Okay, let me make it short. The reason why, yes, Shahid, I'm seeing your hand is up.
the slave trade was, we use was when referring to slave trade because at the moment it's no longer happening in mass whatever,
Okay, thank you.
mass form.
To make it simple, we are looking at which subject are we looking at?
History.
History. When I talk about history, what do we mean?
Things that are past.
Study of the past.
I get it, because the question they're asking you, what was slave trade? Automatically you have to answer it. So slave trade was the buying
And selling of people long ago.
Yeah, buying and selling of human beings. Of human beings. Yeah, and a definition. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? Then there is a difference between slavery. There is a difference between slavery and slave trade. Slavery is a situation of putting someone without, for slavery, you don't, it's not selling, yeah? Just a condition of putting someone in that situation that you have control over that person. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? Are we clear?
Yes.
Just a situation. Now, after seeing that, you are going to see there are many things we can give about these trades. After here, I think we have understood. There are even another name. Which other name was given to Indian Ocean trade? Which other name?
Coastal trade.
Yeah, thank you. It was called also coastal trade. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? Then
Yes.
which other name was given? Other names which were given to long distance trade?
Caravan trade.
It was called caravan
Trade.
trade. Other people called it interior
Trade.
trade. So whenever they give their question and they try to interswitch and they change, the first thing you write in your introduction, you write there, like for example, when they ask you, like for example, when they ask you, what factors led to the development of caravan trade? You just say caravan trade was also known as long distance trade or interior trade. You are making the examiner to understand what you are talking about. Am I clear?
Yes, teacher.
Yeah. So now, after knowing that, the next thing, our topic today, we are here. I was just hoping you to understand the concept of trade in East Africa, knowing that there was Indian Ocean trade, we had long distance trade, and we had slave trade. I know that most people are confused. They are confused here. They don't differentiate between long distance trade and Indian Ocean trade. Now, after seeing that, now let us go and look at yes. Any question? If at all we don't have any question, let us proceed.
Excuse me, teacher.
Yes.
Slave trade was slave trade just practiced within these other trades?
Yeah. It was
Didn't
part
have particular
of like it was part of all trades. Are you getting it? We are talking about it because it caused misery to the people of Africa or East Africa. So slaves were like items, they were commodities. These slave traders took Africans as commodities. They didn't consider them as human beings. Am I clear?
Yes, teacher.
Now, starting with slave trade. Now, let me take you through some little videos here, and you see what do we mean by slave trade, and you look at these videos, and so that we can understand what we are talking about. Okay, let me switch here and let's see. Let me pick the other one. Okay, let me get my Google Classroom and go there. I want to do that. Okay, let me pick my Google Classroom. Hope you can see the screen very well.
Jauhara Zoom lessons are on.
Okay, let me look for slave trade here.
Jauhara Zoom lessons are on.
Okay, people listen. I'm going to start playing this video so that we see what transpired. Yeah? Am I clear?
Yes.
Can you hear the voice very well?
Yes, teacher.
Yes.
Okay, let us observe.
Historians estimate that between 1500 and 1870, more than 11 million men and women were carried across the Atlantic Ocean in ships like these. The passengers were forcibly transported from Africa to the West Indies, Brazil, or other lands of the Americas. These people were enslaved Africans, and their lives on board the slave ships were filled with pain, suffering, and death. In the 1500s, Europeans saw enslaved Africans as a source of inexpensive labor for their colonies. European planters established plantations or huge farms in North America, South America, and the Caribbean. As the plantations grew, more slaves were needed to work on them. Slavery had existed in Africa since ancient times. Some African kings and merchants captured people and sold them as slaves to European traders, as well as to Arab merchants. When the demand grew, kings often sent their warriors to attack neighboring villages for slaves. The Europeans treated slaves like cargo. They were locked inside cells for weeks until ships could take them to colonies across the ocean. For slaves, life on a slave ship during the Middle Passage was a nightmare. Even crew members were shocked by the conditions in the slave holds.
When I had to enter the slave deck, I was forced to crawl over the slaves. The Negroes are frequently packed so close together that they have not so much room as a man in his coffin. I was so overcome with the heat, dense and foul air that I nearly fainted. It was only with assistance I could get on deck.
Alexander Falconbridge. Although the transatlantic slave trade, the bringing of slaves from Africa to the Americas, was abolished by U.S. law in 1804, some traders chose to ignore the law. They continued to capture Africans and transport them across the Atlantic. On June 28, 1839, the Amistad set sail from Havana, Cuba, bound for the Cuban coastal town of Puerto Principe. On board, Captain Ramon Ferrer carried a cargo of 53 African slaves, purchased in Havana. An African on board the Amistad named Seneba Pie fought the men who tried to enslave him and other Africans. One dark night, Seneba Pie, called Sinke by his captors, unlocked his shackles using pieces of metal he'd found on the ship. Working quickly, he freed the rest of the slaves, and they prepared to attack their captors. The Africans took over the Amistad. The cabin steward translated the Africans' demand: sail the ship back to Africa or the crew would be killed. Instead of sailing for Africa, the currents of the Gulf Stream pulled the Amistad north. In the summer of 1839, American newspapers along the eastern seaboard reported wild stories of a ship manned by black pirates. An American ship called the Washington found the Amistad and captured it. The ship, including the Africans, was taken into custody. The Spanish government, which had colonized Cuba, demanded that President Martin Van Buren send the Africans to Cuba, where they would remain slaves. But former President John Quincy Adams thought that the slaves should remain free. He argued that since they had been taken from Africa illegally, they were not then legally slaves. For more than a year, Adams fought for the Africans' release. On March 9, 1841, the Supreme Court of the United States announced its decision.
It is the ultimate right of all human beings in extreme cases to resist oppression and to apply force against ruinous injustice.
Seneba Pie and the other captives were freed. The United States Supreme Court had recognized these Africans as free human beings. Although the Atlantic slave trade came to an end in the 1800s, the damage had been done. African societies were disrupted by depopulation and warfare. Some 2 million people had died on slave ships, and millions more had been forced to endure a life of slavery. Europeans first brought African slaves to the Americas to work A, as indentured servants, B, on plantations, C, as merchant seamen, D, for low wages. What decision did the Supreme Court make in the case of the captives on board the Amistad? A, the court recognized the captives as free human beings. B, the court sent the captives back to Cuba. C, the court ended the slave trade. D, the court sentenced the captives to a prison term for mutiny. What were the causes and effects of the Atlantic slave trade?
Mr. Noordin has come.
I'm been around. I'm been around. Rachel, you are there early. So hope you have seen the video. And probably there are some questions which were there. Not so.
Yes.
The first question was about why the slaves were taken to America. And they gave you A, B, C, D. I don't know which answer you chose.
B.
You chose B. What was B?
To work in their plantations.
Work in their plantations. And then on the second question of ending slave trade, what did the court agree on?
To recognize them as free human beings.
To do what?
To recognize them as free human beings.
Sure. Another option. Someone else with another option.
To send them to Cuba.
To send them to Cuba. You want to give me all the 4 options they gave. You remember the slave Atlantic trade? That is the West African slave trade which was there. You remember I talked about slave trade that started in West Africa, then it came to East Africa after. Not so. Which implies that all those who are done by the best answer of all, it's that the court stopped slave trade or the act of slavery within West Africa. That's why many of the Europeans started to rush and run direct from West Africa to come to East Africa. Are we together there?
Yes, teacher.
Okay. So what started slave trade, and I told you the aspects you look at in the trade. The good thing Mr. Namdala taken me through the introduction. And I told you in the introduction, we look at a specific word of commercial transaction. Okay? The
Yes,
moment you're explaining slave trade and you do not put that word commercial transaction, it implies you're talking about something else. Okay? So slave trade has to be the commercial transaction because they're exchanging. This was not an exchange of goods for goods. People exchanging money to buy slaves. So it was not barter. That's why we call it a commercial
transaction.
Exactly. So people are giving in money, you come and buy. After buying, you own that person. That person becomes part of you, so that person becomes your commodity. So that's how the things used to move on. So from the introduction, we move to small specific reasons as to why slave trade devolved, or as to why slave trade boomed. As we move on, you realize that what we're going to be going through, we're going to go through a question and answer revision bit of it. Because as early as you report back, you're going to be having your end of senior 2 exams. And we need to see you in senior 3. Okay? We don't want you to study senior 2 for 4 years. After failing the paper and they put on your report, advised to repeat. I know some of you, the moment you get that comment, you may run away and go for marriage issues. Okay? Some of you may run to go for marriage. You say, I cannot repeat senior 2. I've studied senior 2 for 3 years. I repeat for the 4th year. Let me go and I give birth. And some extent you're like, okay. People have a sound mind and a good reason as to why they are going there. But I don't want it to happen that way. I want people to move at least. Yeah, we can try our best and finish senior 4 within this. Within some few, okay, we studied for more than 4 years, but as long as we finish and we leave that there. Is it okay?
Yes.
You don't feel isolated. Anytime soon things are going to get better. So when we move, I remember the last question on the video was telling you about the causes and the effects of slave trade. Before we move deep in that, what we should remember or what we should put in mind is that in slave trade, there are two topics in one. Okay? In slave trade, there are two topics in one. We have slave trade, okay, the act itself, then we have the abolition
Of slave trade.
of slave trade. So you'll find that under this aspect, when you start looking deep into this, the introduction is the same, okay? And it will cut across because of this one slave trade. This implies that the introduction of slave trade will remain the same. But now, when we come deep down here, we look at the factors for the growth. Origins for the growth and development of slave trade in East Africa. We look at its organization. We look at the effects of slave trade. Then after here, after the effects of slave trade, when we come down here to the abolition has also its own factors. Okay? One, we have the methods in abolition. We have the steps taken in abolition. 3, we have the effects of the abolition. Are we there? From the effects, we have the problems faced by the abolitionists. So you see that what confuses most, what I wanted to bring out most is this. The effects here and the effects here. These two effects are different. Okay? The effects of the abolition are different from the effects of slave trade. Why? In the effects of slave trade, we have to remember that for it, it was a trade as any other trade. So people are benefiting from it, people are enjoying, and people are feeling like without it, life will be hard. So you'll find many effects of African chicks becoming wealthy, developing of the transport trade routes. You talk about kingdoms also growing big and conquering others. Here, when you talk about slave trade, after acquiring the brutal methods of acquiring slave trade, etc. When you come to the effects of the abolition, here it implies that the process that started to stop. Okay. In abolition, they are stopping slave trade. So the effects of stopping the trade cannot be the same as the effects of something which is moving on. If we say what are the effects of you being at school, they are not going to be the same effects of you being stopped from going to school, because they say what are the effects of school going kids, which means we talk about those effects in almost around school. Okay, feeding, accommodation, mosquitoes, everything. They're not going to be the same as the effects of stopping you or abolishing you from going to school.
School.
You'll be scared of the outside environment more than the school environment. Are we there? So these are going to take us through the slave trade, and will accomplish the slave trade the way it is. What will not confuse us, it is these two. These two when we come to the abolition of slave trade. Because the methods, you will find them corresponding with the steps. Reason being, we have the treaty signing, we have the patrols, which were used, we have the missionaries, which came to spread. You'll find the same in the steps taken in the abolition of slave trade. But what makes it different? What makes it look different, when you come to steps, those who recall very well the Portuguese conquest in East Africa or on the coast of East Africa, there is that kind of sequence of years, okay?
Yes.
That kind of years. In this year, 1498, this happened, okay? The same is going to come and happen when you come to the steps, whereby we will say, because when you come to treaties, there are many treaties which were signed. The Hamilton Treaty, the Bagash Treaty, the Sapere Treaty, all those treaties were signed to abolish slave trade, but they were signed in different years. So which means here, where you get to one point in the methods by writing treaty signing, when you come to the steps taken, you will have like three points. Because you talk about all the treaties, the ones being signed in 1841, being signed in 1845, okay? So all these treaties will be looked at under the steps, because there will be categorizing one by one to avoid confusion from the methods which would have been there. So that's how we'll be going through. The next, which you should not forget when you're talking about trade, I think I talked to the Southerners the last lesson we had. Normally when they say trade, they want, when the person comes in trade, at least they want people to write about the organization. If it is not in part A, you will find it in part B. So when you come to these organizations, some of these organizations are different, though many people tend to make them look alike or look the same. When you come to the organization of slave trade, I tell people slaves were the main item. Okay? Let us forget about gold. Let us forget about ivory. Let us forget about other activities or other commodities. The slaves were the main item. So, if the slaves were the main item, what should we do? One, how are these slaves got? Okay, how were these slaves got or acquired? Okay, so because we're writing about the organization of slave trade, so we look at the slaves themselves. How were they got? The first method of getting them, we had the raids. Okay, through raiding of villages, through raiding of homes and different communities. That was the first of how they got the slaves in East Africa. From there, move to the second. They had lonely travelers. Okay, they used to find people. These things of moving away from home. They ask you, where are you going? I'm going, however, where? I'll find somewhere to go. Let me just get out of home. You are alone moving on the streets. The slave traders find you. It was easy to capture because you are alone. Okay, you can't fight all of them. So it was easy for them to do whatever they want, and they take you in that aspect. So the lonely travelers were also taken. Then another method of getting the slaves, after the raids, we had what we call the criminal side of it. Okay, the criminal side of it. How do we come to it? How do we come to the criminal side of it? Some human beings were criminals in society. Okay, we have thieves.
Yeah.
Okay, we have thieves. We have rapists.
Witch doctors.
Those we have even witches. Okay, we're not saying that whoever is here and is a witch, we're going to take you. The truth. Don't worry. Things will be okay. You just tell us, and we find the end of how to handle you. Nowadays, people do witchcraft openly. You have ever seen them on TV? They even advertise themselves. For me, when you come at my place, I can give you wealth. I can give you this.
Mama Fina.
Mama Fina. Yeah, and even others. They advertise witchcraft openly. And by that time, the criminal aspect of it, if I know you're criminal, it was easy for people to take you and they give you in as slaves. And this was mostly done by the chiefs, because they're the ones in charge of those areas and the people. So the moment they come, they say, but the other daughter of Mr. Sevana Chita may overspread AIDS on our area here. Is overserving things. What should we do? We serve her, we give her there as a slave. So they take you in that aspect. The other boy is also becoming stubborn. Every time he's beating his friends. Every time he's doing this. What should we give him that? So there is to give him those people to avoid criminality within their areas. Then from there, these things of, there's also the method of another aspect of hand picking. Hand picking, they come, you are many, and they say, okay, we're looking for someone who is energetic, someone who is, let me say, who is bold. Now, like me, you see the mass. See the mass, and they say that one we are taking.
Mama.
They see
Mama.
They see the one pack, and they feel like this one pack is enough. It will handle. Though for you are looking for 6 packs. For them, they see one pack. This one is good. So they just hand pick you. No need come and go. And other people are given in as just an addition. In Uganda, I call it a nyongeza. You have ever heard of a nyongeza?
Yes.
Something to appreciate. So they say, we've taken this Noordin, this Peru to go as a nyongeza. Peru to go sweet. They just add you just for goodness sake, because the other person they have taken is enough to handle. So that's how it moves. So imagine an organization upon this, which means in the process of acquisition of slaves, we have 4 points. Are we there? So from there, what comes to our mind next? The roots they use. Okay, the roots they they used.
You.
If we come to the roots they used, that's the way of movement. We remember that up to what we have the northern, we have the central, and we have
The southern.
the southern.
Southern.
The southern root. Not forgetting the root of the Kautumas. The root of the Kautumas. Are we there? So this implies that we are having 4 points already. When we are talking about the roots. Are you getting it? So these are also 4 points. You tell us the northern root, and you are in charge of it. This is in charge of the Akamba. Okay. The central, it was in Nyamwezi. Then the southern, it was the Yao. Then this Kautumas route, it was still controlled by the Kautumas. So now what comes? What comes now to explain everything is that this organization will have marks. The moment you say question of organization, it will have 13 marks. So out of the 13 marks, we already have 8 marks. These 4 and these 4. So we are looking for 5. Okay? We are looking for 5. So to remove the 5th point, the fifth mark will be for the conclusion. Okay? The 5th mark will be for the conclusion. From the conclusion, it implies that you have remained with 4 marks. How do you get the 4? The 2 marks are going to be for the map. Okay? The 2 marks will be for the map, which implies we are only having 2 marks to go, and we can put any of the other points which we feel like 1. We can talk of the middleman, then we can talk about the head portent, which was also a method used by people when they're moving. You talk about the slaves being chained, you talk about them being fed poorly, and when they're still on the way, but when they reach the coastal area where they're going to sell them, they give them a lot of food to eat and each and everything. So that is just a small, simple summary when we talk about the organization of slave trade in East Africa.
Trade.
So, but probably when we meet again, will be somehow elaborative. From all those aspects, we started with the factors for the growth, then the organization of slave trade, then the effects, then after we move to the evolution of slave trade in East Africa. So that is it for today. Hope we have at least got something, and we have all enjoyed, and it has been okay. Okay, unless when there is any question which you feel.
How do they write the conclusion?
How do you write the
conclusion?
How do you write the conclusion? I told you the conclusion is the easiest. I want people to enter the examination room when they have 4 marks, which means that every number you'll be having a conclusion. So you enter when you already have the 4 marks, because the conclusion carries one mark. If you can't relate anything of the question, which I know it is rare, the best conclusion to write is, in conclusion, there are 4, depending on the question, if there are effects, if there are problems, if it was organization, if it was what else can be said there, if there are steps, methods, etc. In conclusion, therefore, the above were the political, social, and
Economic.
Either effects, problems. If you can't even make it, you say the above were the, in conclusion, therefore, the above were the political, social, and economic aspects. Then you tell us what is deep in the question. Okay. If the effects, you say just economic effects, all the aspects of effects, the political, social, and economic problems faced by these people, or methods used. Are you getting it? This is the better. When you read the question very well, you can still have the negative and positive. Okay? You can still use negative and positive in the conclusion. If you don't use positive and negative, or political, social, and economic, you can use long term and short term. Are we there? But we'll look at different aspects when time comes of how, under which aspect are we going to look at the short term and long term. Under which question are we going to look at the negative and the positive. For this political, social, and economic, it cuts across. In case you have forgot what you are doing in the paper, which is impossible, that's when you use this political, social, and the economic, because for it, it cuts across each and every aspect. So that is it. Unless when there is another question. Chigozi. Yes, Nusra? Because your hand is up.
Teacher.
Yes.
You've said when you're introducing in trade, you say it's the commercial transaction. By commercial transaction, I think it's use of money. So while you're introducing in slave, they also say commercial transaction, because I think in slave trade they were just exchanging.
They said when introducing slave trade, okay? When introducing slave trade, it was the commercial transaction because people used money. People are using money. When we come to long distance trade, it was barter, okay? It was exchange of goods for goods, mostly. But when you come to slave trade, it was commercial because people were paying. Because we have the coins, okay? We have the cowl shells were there and people are using them. So people needed the money more than the items now, because it's the money which made them wealthy. Are we there?
Yes.
So it is the money which made them wealthy, but not the other activities and commodities. That's why they became too rich by the time of slavery, and they never wanted to even stop or end. Okay, so that is it. And that's why we use the term commercial transaction. Because you are buying money. There you have said it, cash. Okay, so that is it for today. Let me let you prepare for the next lesson, which is coming in.